The first tip is to use a better quality of polar fleece so it will wash nice and last longer. It should feel soft, not gritty, and have anti-pilling properties. If you're shopping at Joann Fabrics, they have three lines of fleece: Blizzard, Anti-Pill, and Luxe. Please stay with the Anti-Pill or the Luxe. The Blizzard is not sturdy enough to stay nice during repeated wash and wear. So feel the fabric if you're in the store. Read the end of the bolt or the fabric selvage to see if it says Anti-Pill or Luxe. Your time and money is worth the effort to use a nice material. Next, make sure your machine has a ballpoint needle, size 14 or 16 when sewing on fleece. My machine likes a Schmetz needle. I can use a jersey, size 80 or 90, or a universal 14 or 16. Please check your sewing machine requirements to see what works best for you. Have good quality thread, and to accommodate the thickness of your fleece, loosen your stitch tension slightly so it can go through those thick layers, and don't forget to increase the length of your stitches as needed. Each machine is different, so please test your machine by sewing on scraps of fleece until you have the settings where you want them. Because of the thickness of the fleece, sometimes it's hard to get it going if you're starting off at the very edge and coming onto it. Now, you can use a hump jumper or a Genama-jig to help you start. You just place this behind your presser foot, and then it makes it the same level as your fleece as you're sewing, which is very helpful. Now, the other thing that I like to do is I will start in about a length of a presser foot and then back stitch to the back, and then come forward again with the aid of either a stiletto or a purple thang. And these will just help push the fabric along and guide it as you're sewing. Just make sure not to catch this underneath your needle, because obviously you can break a lot of needles or wound a lot of your purple things. But once you get the hang of it, I think it's very nice to help. Of course, if you have a walking foot, that would be ideal to help keep these materials together. Also, use plenty of clips and pins. You will want to test your materials and your machine to see which seam finishing is right for your project. Fleece usually does not ravel, so it is acceptable to not finish the seams if this is the case with your material. This is just a straight stitch and pressed open flat with my fingers. A serger will overcast and stitch the seam in one step, but I find that it leaves a thick edge. If you're planning on top stitching that could be cumbersome to try to get the correct distance you need away in order to top stitch. But again, it depends on the application and what you're sewing. Now, this is an overcast stitch done on the sewing machine, which is really quite lovely. It's got a little bit of a give to it, and it does do a finish edge. Very substantial seam, but again, if you're planning on top stitching, it gives you that kind of lump that you need to be careful of in order to work over. My go-to stitch is just a straight stitch on the seam with a graded seam allowance. After I've done a straight stitch on the seam, I come back and trim one of the seam allowances shorter than the other one. And this does reduce a lot of the bulk. Plus, if I'm planning on doing a top stitch, it makes a nicer presentation for top stitching. Now, depending on what you want to do too, you can just straight stitch it, press the seam allowances back, and do a double top stitch if you want that sporty look. But bear in mind too that this might not be the correct stretch that you need for what you're making. So that's why it's important that you test your fabrics with the different stitches on your machine so you can get the right stitch, the right application for the right project.
And last but not least, sewing on fleece can leave a lot of lint building up in your sewing machine. So remember to clean it often because, as we all know, a clean machine is a happy machine. Thank you.